Hello everybody, hello. We just completed chapter 3, like Gila said last week, which is the soul of man. So if it took us a year to learn, one chapter, it's going to take us about a year and a half to learn the next chapter. Okay, alright, so I do want to move on to chapter 4. By the way, we started with chapter 3. It's important to note because Rabbi Steinsaltz often says that if you are going to study this book, his 13 Petalled Road, you should start with chapter 3. Chapter 1 and 2 might set you off. Chapter 1 and 2 are very esoteric. They speak about the four worlds, Kabbalah, and many very abstract notions. So better start with chapter 3. Eventually, when we finish the book, then we'll go to chapter 1 and 2. But for now, I want to continue on to chapter 4, which is the chapter of holiness. Holiness here in this chapter, just as a simple introduction, will be defined, I think, in a way that is not defined anywhere else. If you were to ask anyone, someone in the street, what is your definition of holiness? They will tell you someone very spiritual, someone does miracles, I don't know. This definition of holiness is very, very different, but I think, of course, it is the Jewish definition of holiness, and it goes back to the very word for holiness in Hebrew, which is the word kedusha. I will say this, and he's going to develop this idea, but the word kedusha in Hebrew is not only applied to holy people, holy sites, like the Temple Mount is called holy, but it's also applied to kedesha in Hebrew, means a prostitute. So it's also applied to that. Now, how can you say that a prostitute is holy, or that these two words can even be in the same sentence, in the same breath? But this is why holiness is to be completely redefined. And this is what he does here in chapter 4. So, who wants to read? Let's start chapter 4, page 51 by the way in this book. Holiness is applied to all that which is different, all that which is other. There are things that our world can define, that science can define, for example, and there are things that science can't even touch. Right? I just, yesterday, a lady shared with me that she had cancer, the doctors didn't give her a chance, and now thank God, she's fully recovered, and it's a walking miracle. Wow. Now, how do you explain that? How does science explain that? You can't explain that. That belongs to that realm of the other. That realm, everything that belongs in that realm, that cannot be defined by anything, not by science, not by this world, not by the human mind, is considered kadosh, is considered holy. And therefore, in Hebrew, really, the synonym of holy, of holiness, is not spiritual or whatever else you may think, but the synonym of holy is separated. Separated. That's why, by the way, I'm sure you've all been to Jewish weddings in which the groom takes out a ring and he places it on the bride's finger, and then what does he say? Harei at mekudeshetli. You are mekudeshet. You are holy to me. Holy? She's holy to you? What does that mean? No, she's separated to you. She's separated now from all other women. You are separated from all other men. You together now have separated yourselves from the masses to be one with one another. That's what it means. It doesn't necessarily mean holy, sanctified, but it means separated. That's the synonym. Separated, but here he says more than that, separated from anything that the human mind can grasp, that the human mind can define. That is considered holy. Now, sometimes this holiness is embodied by people or in places. Some people, you can actually see their holiness. You can hear the holiness. You can, they can relate to their holiness to you, performing miracles and things like that. So you have holy people too. But that holiness in them comes from the other side that is manifested in them. Okay? Now I will dare say that's why I believe everyone is holy. Because we're all connected to that other side. We're not just defined by our bodies, by what science, how science may define us. We are defined by something much more than that, transcendent, something that you can never grasp. Every one of us has a piece of that inside us. And therefore, every one of us is holy at the deepest level. Right? But that's what really holiness means. That which is separated, that which can't be grasped. by anything, any human tool. Let's continue a little bit more. Right, and it's very profound, but I would say that anything that is holy does not have any definition, any box that you can place that holy thing in. It can only be defined not by that which it is, but by that which it is not. Right? And that's why God is the ultimate holy entity. We can't say God is good. God is much more than that. Part of him is good. He's good. You can't say he's benevolent. That's an attribute of God, but it's not God himself. So what is God? God is infinite. The infinite can't be defined. The minute you define infinite, it's not infinite anymore. So the only way you can really define God is by saying that which he is not. God is not evil. But you can't say what he is. The opposite of evil is good. He's more than good. Separate from what? That's the question. Separate from any human definition. From anything the mind can grasp. From any earthly tool that can measure it. It's separate than that. So, but I'm going to go back to that, and that's a good point. So I want to go back to that. But why is a prostitute called holy? The word is used, kedisha. She's separated from society. She's secluded completely from society. It's not something that the human mind maybe can grasp, but it's not something that is within the realm of a healthy human mind. She's separated. Yes and no. You can say on a very simplistic level, you can say the Torah is the 5 books of Moses. It's a compilation of God's words to Moses. But it's much more than that. In essence, the Torah is also divine, right? And therefore, one can study Torah and study Torah and study Torah and never really finish it. And like the Zohar says, that the goal of knowledge is to not know. Because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And that's the infinity, that's the holiness of the Torah. That's correct. Now, you can play an exercise in your spare time if you want, but think of anything that you might consider holy and see if it is indeed infinite, if it's separated from any human definition. Why attempt to know something that you'll never know? Yeah. Right? That's a good question. I'm going to answer by a Hasidic anecdote. But there were two married couples who couldn't have children for a very long time. They each went to see their Rebbe, the Hasidic master. It was the same Hasidic master. And the Hasidic master gave a blessing to each of them. They should have children soon. After a year, one of them had a child. The other one still remained childless. He waited another year, another still remained childless. He went back to the Rebbe. He said, "You gave us both the same blessing. Why did he have children and I didn't?" And the Rebbe said, "That's because after I gave him a blessing, the one that didn't have children, he immediately went to buy a crib. He went to buy baby's clothes. He prepared a vessel for the blessing to enter. You didn't do anything about it. You were still skeptic of my blessing. You waited, you were passive. You stayed outside. So you don't have children." But and he understood the message. He gave him a blessing, and he finally had children because he went to buy the crib, not the next day, but that same day. But what I'm saying is this: sometimes we can say, you know what, let's stay on the outside. There's no point. But by going into the inside and knowing that which we might eventually never fully grasp, it transforms us. It creates us into a blessing. The question is, how do you define not to know, right? The goal of knowledge is to not know. How do you define that? You're right. There is something happening. There is something that you can very much sense, understand. I mean, if you didn't know Aleph and you went to study Aleph, right, one of the Hebrew letters, then you know Aleph. You can't say, I don't know Aleph. But more than the structure, I think it's the essence. More than the body, it's the soul. In other words, when I study Torah, I might know a lot of information, I might have accumulated a lot of knowledge, but the soul of the Torah, that infinity in the Torah, I can never understand. That I can never connect to. I think it's like love. I really think it's like love. Most pop songs are written about love now for decades. No one knows what love is. I Want to Know What Love Is one of the songs, actually. But no one knows what love is. Now, you can say love is a deed. You can define love in different ways. But at the very end, if you are truly in love, that love is immeasurable. You still don't know what it is. It transcends the human mind. I think it's the same thing that happens when we study Torah. There's a soulful connection with God that is transcendent, that you can't really grasp. You can't say it's about this mitzvah or that mitzvah. You can't say it's about this Torah or that Torah book or that Torah. It's much more than that. There's something that you can't grasp, something that is inexplicable. There's a whole Hasidic discourse about this, about love. You can try this in the supermarket, or maybe with each other. But if you are staring at someone, and he's not looking at you, right? You're staring at someone, you might be looking just at the side of his face. He doesn't know that you're staring at him. At one point, that person that you're staring at will look back at you.
I've tried it.
And right, you've tried it.
It's true, because I know energy.
So, we'll look back at you. Why? Because there is something that he's felt. There's an energy that he's felt. Now, how do you define that energy? I don't know. I don't even know if it can scientifically be defined. But there's something there that he's felt. And that's the type of love that you feel in relationships. When you stare at each other with deeds and in so many other ways, there's something that he's felt. I don't know what it's about, but it's felt. It's there. Right. It's a good point. And same it is with Hashem. That's why, to take it to a different level, but the Baal Shem Tov, the big philosophical question is, who am I? What are we? Are we what we eat? Some nutritionists might tell you. I don't know. Rene Descartes will tell you, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. We are our thoughts. I think the Jewish view is that you are what you do. The more you do good, the more you become good. The Baal Shem Tov took it in a different direction, and he said that you are wherever your thoughts are at that moment. If your thoughts are in a soccer field, that's who you are. You're a soccer fan. You're a soccer fanatic. If your thoughts are about God, then that's who you are. Then you're godly at that moment. You are defined by where your thoughts are, by the location of your thoughts. Now, in a way, that thought, right, creates something, creates a definition. That definition is maybe the definition of self, but the essence of it is very hard to grasp. But, and in a way, that's the realm, going back, that's the realm of the holy. Holiness is that which cannot be defined, that which is felt maybe. It's there. How do you call it? The energy, you said, right? That is there. But it's not defined in any shape or form. Now, what's interesting is that, as mentioned before, every one of us has that holiness within. We all have things that doctors can't define. This cancer patient, there was a miracle within her. Something that no one can understand. Everyone has that. Now, sometimes it appears in forms of miracles. Sometimes just appears in forms of feelings. So I'm sure it's happened to each and every one of you, but sometimes you wake up in the morning feeling spiritual. Feel like, wow, that's it. This is my day. I better buy a lottery ticket. Now, why? Nothing really triggered that. Why? Because it's your soul speaking. We spoke about that in the soul of man. It's that thing that's holy within you that's speaking. And that you can very much sense. The thing is that you have to do something about it. You can't just say, I'm holy, and that's it. It doesn't help the world, it doesn't help you. Good. I will say this. It's interesting. We're going back to the word holy. In Hebrew, the word kadosh, and this he doesn't write in this chapter, but it's very much connected. But the word kadosh in Hebrew actually is a combination, as they say, of two words. If you split the word. So kadosh is spelled kuf dalet shin. If you split the word into two, this is a very Kabbalistic idea, so excuse the kadosh. If you split into two, you have kod on one side, kuf dalet, and shin on the other side. Now, kod in Hebrew means kod means a peak. The end of a pole, for example, of a pencil is called kod. That's that. Kod is a modern Hebrew word, I think. Yeah. But anyway, it means a peak. Shin in Hebrew. Shin comes from the word lishnot, shana, mishnah. We say the mishnah. Shin in Hebrew. Leshanot means to learn, to study. To study. Now, what's interesting is they say, who is a holy man? One who can study and repeat and go back and dig and dig and dig into his peak. We each have a peak. The highest level of ourselves is that soul that we were speaking about. If you're able to go and shin and exercise it again and again and again, then you're holy. So the more you study that peak, the more you exercise it, speaking about it's good to have it, it's true, and feels good sometimes. You wake up in the morning. But if you don't exercise it, it's not going to help. If you really want to be holy, then you have to go back to it again and again and again. You have to exercise that inner holiness. I mean, the Hebrew, it goes, that pertains to every Hebrew word out there, right? That has multiple meanings. There's so many Hebrew words that have so many different meanings. My favorite is mashber, but that's a different story. It's not connected to holiness. But mashber in Hebrew means crisis, but it also means the bed on which women give birth. That's because in every crisis there's an opportunity of birth. But that's true for every Hebrew word, right? So mashber and other words like that. God codified the Hebrew language in such a way. I think it was there already. We just came to analyze it. Just like Kedusha, that's right. It's like Kadosh. Lashon HaKodesh, that's right. It's called the holy language. It's a good point. Hebrew is called Lashon HaKodesh. Thank you, Akiva, it's called the holy language because it has that otherness. Because Kadosh means holy, and we say that multiple times in the service. Before the Shema, we say Kadosh, 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 and then we say it in the Kedusha also. That phrase, Kadosh, 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 is what the Talmud tells us is the prayer of the angels. It's the prayer of the angels. Now, it's the prayer of really three groups of angels. One says Kadosh just once. The other one says Kadosh, Kadosh just twice. And the third one says Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh 3 times. 3 groups of angels. Now we say Kadosh, 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 like the third group. But if you look carefully in your Siddur, you'll see a line separating the first Kadosh from the other 2 Kadoshes. Why? To remind us of all the 3 groups. 1 Kadosh is for the first group, the one that's set aside. 2 Kadoshes that's set aside on the left side is for that second group. And then 3 altogether is for the third group. So that we include all 3 groups when we say it. When we say that Kadosh, Kadosh, so we lift ourselves up a little bit on our toes. Why? Because it's the prayer of angels. And angels are lofty. They're heavenly. So we act like angels when we say their prayer. Very good. It's true also during the other prayers of angels. Yimloch and so on. That's right. For each time we evoke the angels, then we lift our feet up. That's correct. The Hasidim would jump, not just lift their toes. If you go to Hasidic shuls in Israel, there's an actual, the Breslov Hasidim jump all the way up. It's true. You know, they say, you remind me, and I'm sorry I'm deviating a little bit, but what are the kosher signs for animals? That they have to have split hooves, right? And have to chew their cubs. So there's a beautiful Hasidic commentary that says that's the kosher signs also for human beings. Not that we have hooves, not that we chew our cubs, but that in order to be kosher or holy, we can't have our feet completely attached to the ground. We also have to be split a little bit. We have to be lifted. So from time to time in the prayer, we have to be angelic. That we can remind ourselves of our angelic side too. We can't be connected to the ground all the time. We have to have split hooves. So that's why we do it also. To remind ourselves really of our angelic side or of our holy side. Kadosh, Kadosh. Okay. Consequently, let's continue. Consequently, does anyone want to read? The only one who can be called holy. Thank you. Don't worry, it's not easy words. This is, as I said, this is like the Torah of Rabbi Steinsaltz. So every word counts here. But ultimate being that is holy, the only one that we can say is entirely holy, as we said, within ourselves we have a holy part. But it's not our entire self. We also have a human body and so on. There are places that are holy, but they're not the holiness themselves. The holiness, the only one that we can say is entirely holy is God himself. He's entirely transcendent. He's entirely infinite. He's the only one who cannot be defined by what he is, but what he is not. He is that otherness. That's the holiness. Now, from him, from God himself, as the source of holiness, as the holy entity, comes all other holy things in the world. So if God decides to take a part of himself and put it in us, called the soul, then we are also a little bit holy. If God decides to call a place holy, it becomes holy. By the way, it's revolutionary. If you compare it to Christianity, for example, it's completely different, very different. It's the opposite. Because think about this. Mount Sinai, no one knows where it is, but Mount Sinai was never called a holy place. Wasn't. Now, you may think God gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai, the most majestic moment in Jewish history, the holiest item God gave us on Mount Sinai. Why didn't Mount Sinai become a holy place? It should have been holy, right? That's because holiness does not come from us, from our designation of something, of someone as holy. Holiness can only come from God. If God didn't call Mount Sinai holy, it's not holy. God called Jerusalem holy, it's holy. God called the Holy Temple holy, it's holy. Why? He is the source of holiness, so he can designate what is holy and what is not. We can't. That's why. We can't say that so-and-so, as Christians say about a certain human being, that he's holy. We don't have that power. Only God can say who's holy. God can say, if you act in this way, you'll become holy. If you act in a modest way, for example, then your camp will be holy. That's what it says. But he can only designate that, right? If you follow, but what are those instances? And then there's a whole list of things. Right, exactly. One of them is simple things like respecting parents, or like loving your fellow as yourself. So on. These are all ways that make us holy. Why? Because God designated those deeds as holy deeds that can make us holy. If God hadn't designated those deeds as holy deeds that can make us holy, they wouldn't be holy necessarily. They would be important, but they wouldn't be holy. So that's where holiness really comes from. Because he's the source of holiness, holiness can only come from God. Nothing else. No one else. Again, that's one of the main differences I think that Judaism has versus other religions. We don't make Muhammad holy. We don't make Jesus holy. We can't. That's God's job. It's not my job. It's not anyone's job. God has his realm of holiness. He can bestow holiness upon anyone he wants. It's almost like General Schwarzkopf in the Gulf War. He was once asked, can you forgive terrorists? And he said, no, that's not my job. It's God's job. Only he can forgive terrorists. My job is to make the meeting between them. Values that we hold dear to our hearts as Jews. And you'll see that usually those are values that God said, this is holy, like loving your fellow as yourself. That's in Kedoshim. And that's the portion of holiness. But that's, again, because God was a GPS defining what is holy and what is not. Whether it's places or whether it's values or other things. So going back to Mount Sinai, and this is, I want to go to this line because I think just overlooking this will be doing a disservice to Rabbi Steinsaltz and to that which he writes here. There's a deeply Kabbalistic notion that the entire world, the whole existence of mankind, I'm just thinking of Justin Trudeau, who yesterday, the Prime Minister. Yeah, exactly.
What happened?
The whole existence of mankind. So there was this lady yesterday, apparently in Canada, was speaking to the Prime Minister in a forum, and she said the word mankind, and he corrected her and said, we like to be inclusive here. We don't use the word mankind, we use the word people kind. So gender equality and so on. Whatever. But I'm going to use the word mankind if you don't mind. So the whole existence of mankind can be divided into three realms. There is what's called in Hebrew olam, shana, nefesh, which is exactly this: time, place, and soul. Olam is the place, the world. Shana, it means year, which means the time. So we calculate time. And then nefesh, the soul. Everything enters one of these three categories. Whether it's this table, that's olam. Otherwise, it's time. Otherwise, it's nefesh. By the way, when Mount Sinai, when God gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai, we just read this last week in last week's portion. It says, "Ve'ahar ashan kulo," that the mountain was filled with smoke, ashan. The Kabbalistic commentaries say no. The Torah was given to all of these three realms. How do we know? Because it says it was filled with ashan. Ashan is not smoke. Ashan is the initials of Ayin stands for olam, world, Shin stands for shana, and Nun stands for nefesh. So the Torah was given to all of these three realms. You can't say that there's a part of our existence that's not connected to Torah. But that's time, place, and soul. So that encompasses everything, our entire existence. Now, this holiness can permeate, that God designates, right? Can permeate and has permeated and is found in all of these three realms too. Some places are holy, as we said. Some times are holy. Why is Rosh Hashanah holy? Because God designated it as a holy day. That's all. That's why it's holy. So it's permeated time and it's permeated soul. The soul which is within each and every one of us. That's why, we can't change Jewish holidays, and we have a tough time with playing with the calendar each and every year. If God said that the 10th of Tishrei is the 10th of Tishrei, is Yom Kippur, that's the day that's holy. Very often, like we said, the feelings that we have at waking up in the morning, that example that we used, is connected to the soul feeling something. But I do want to say there's one exception to that, and that is if someone is lost in the Sahara Desert, say, and he lost the track of time. He doesn't know whether today is Monday, or whether it's Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday, or Friday, or Shabbat. When should he celebrate Shabbat? When should he stop from working and rest and do Kiddush and celebrate Shabbat? He doesn't know what day it is. He should designate the day that he's thinking of that as Shabbat. Tonight starts Shabbat, and from there, count 7 days, start his cycle until he gets out of the Sahara Desert, and good luck with that. But you're right, start that day. Now, it's interesting, because that's the only time in which we can make time holy. I might be completely wrong. It might be Monday today, but for me, I counted it as Shabbat, yet it's still holy. How? Why is that an exception? Because that's the power of Shabbat. Shabbat is a marriage between God and the human being. So God makes it holy, but we too have to make it holy. Because God gave us the power to make it holy, so we can make it holy even on a Monday. I think it holds also another lesson to it, and that is that you can't delay things that are valuable. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, Joseph Telushkin, was saying this, but the Lubavitcher Rebbe changed one line, and he changed the entire meaning of that line. The line that's so common in America, and that is that I'm sure you've heard it, that anything worth doing is worth doing well, right? But the Lubavitcher Rebbe crossed out the word well, and he said anything worth doing is worth doing now. Now, if you have something worth doing, do it now. Why postpone something that's worth doing? Do it now. And in a way, I think that's the other message I learned from this beautiful Jewish law. The Shabbat, don't wait in 5 days. Not do it now. It's worth doing it now. There's a beautiful story about the 15th century luminary, Rabbi David ibn Zimra, who once received a letter from a Jew in prison. A Jew that was thrown to prison for no reason. This was during the time of the Spanish Inquisition a little bit. And this Jew writes in his letter to the Rabbi David ibn Zimra, I need your advice. I've been sentenced to life in prison or completely innocent. He was truly innocent. If you walk into any prison, I've visited inmates all over this country, and I haven't found an inmate that's guilty yet. Everyone's innocent in prison. But he was truly innocent. And he said, I'm truly innocent. But the warden had a good mood the other day, and he's giving me 1 day of vacation per year. What day should I pick? That's what he's asking Rabbi David. Should it be Yom Kippur? Should it be my anniversary? My birthday? What day should I pick?
Today.
Rabbi David Ibn Zira exactly said that. The first day they give you, that's the day that you should pick. Whether it's a Tuesday or Wednesday, it doesn't matter. And God, God is giving you freedom. Take it now. Anything we're doing is we're doing now. Don't wait. Don't delay. But that's the message also in this Shabbat halacha. But again, going back to Kedusha, that ability to sanctify time on Shabbat also comes from us, not just from Hashem. All right. Just a little bit more. Let's continue here on top of page 52. It explains why, and I think we've spoken about this in the past, but there's something that to me is fascinating. There's something in science called multiple discoveries. It speaks of discoveries throughout history that were introduced to humanity. How would Justin Trudeau say humanity? You people, Liddy? You people, Liddy? things that were introduced to humanity, but discoveries, but they were invented by different people at the same time. And those different people didn't even know of the existence of one another. Right? So the phone is a classic example that we've used, but other examples, including, you can say Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were living at the same time. Exactly. That's right. Calculus was discovered by multiple people at the same time. There's many examples like that. Exactly. Now, in a way, that speaks to your point. Sometimes God gives a blessing, and He says, yeah, whoever grabs it first will be the inventor of that blessing. And if you are in tune with that, anything worth doing is worth doing now, then you become an inventor. Otherwise, history will forget you. Okay, very good. All right, 52. Let's just read two more lines. The holiness of a place. Right, so if we speak of God as the source of holiness, God, for whatever reason, and we won't go into it now because He will go into it afterwards, for whatever reason, decided to marry His holiness with a very tangible physical place. What was that place? What is that place? Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, the Holy of Holies. That's why when we pray, we have to face Israel, and then in Israel, Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem, the temple, and in the temple, the Holy of Holies. Because that is where the marriage of God and this world happens, with this holiness being completely fluid. Now, that explains, by the way, the Talmud says, something that's fascinating, that would fascinate any architects among us. But the Holy of Holies had very specific measurements. You can find them in the portion of Terumah coming up next week. Very specific measurements. There was one vessel, one utensil in the Holy of Holies, not the menorah, not the table with the bread. The ark was in the Holy of Holies. The Holy Ark that had within it broken tablets. That ark also had very specific measurements. When you measured the ark and then you measured the Holy of Holies, the ark was bigger than the Holy of Holies. It couldn't fit in the Holy of Holies. Yet, it fit. It fit. It couldn't fit physically, architecturally, mathematically, it couldn't fit, but it fit. Va'aron eino min hamidah, the Talmud says. It fit, even though it couldn't fit. Why? Because when you have God marrying His holiness to a place that becomes holy, then that place becomes transcendent. It's in this world, but it's above this world. It's that type of marriage. And that's the city of Jerusalem. That's why you have what's called, and it's actually a medical term, I'm sure you've, Sharon, there's something called the Jerusalem syndrome, where people go to Jerusalem and they think that they become crazy. They think that they are messiahs and everything. Because it is a city with tremendous holiness. And that holiness can impact you. But that's yet another proof. Yeah, they walk around with all sorts of things. things, yeah. But but it's the holiness of the city, the holiness that is almost tangible. But that's that. We will speak more about how really this holiness is married to a place, and then what's most important, I think, is married also to us. And then the question, like in any marriage, is not just whether God is married to us, but whether we married to Him also. That's the question. All right. Unfortunately, we'll not be here in 2 weeks. I'll be out of town celebrating my brother's wedding. Thank you. So if that's okay with everyone, February 14th, next week will be the next class. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.